All right, the day you've been waiting for is finally here. We're going to start painting. So, in order to paint, there's a couple things you need to have ready to go. You need to have first your brushes. I've got four of my brushes here. Got my assignment I'm going to do. I need my palette. We're going to start out first with just black and white paint. So here's my white paint, some of my black paint. I need some of my paint thinner. In this case, it's going to be my water and a paper towel handy. Okay, these are the basic things you need to get started painting. A couple words about your brushes. I've chosen these basic brushes here. These are the main ones that you need to have and you need to you'll use quite often. The one you'll probably use the most is this round. I have a number 8 or number 10 round. Okay, this is you can tell easily from the round shape. It comes to a nice sharp point. And then you have a small size 1 or 0 round, which is for all your really fine little bits of details. Okay, then you're also going to have, and I recommend having a filbert brush, which looks like this. Okay, it is kind of flat from one end. Okay, and then as the bristles come out, it kind of has a curve to it. These are great for blending, and I do a lot of painting with these as well. I do recommend that you suggest if you have other brushes here, it's nice to have a larger flat brush to get bigger areas and paint a little bit quicker. But I would say these are the most essential. If you have to pick just 3 brushes to start with, I would pick and go with these. Okay, so when you get a brush, they often come in these little plastic tubes over top of them. Those are just to protect it while it's being shipped so it doesn't get smashed. So just take them off, throw them away, don't try to reuse them. And oftentimes they're a little stiff when you first get them, so you have to rinse them a little bit in the water to soften them up a little bit before you can actually use them. Okay, now in my other video I'll talk about later how to keep your brushes clean. So you want to make sure that you clean them out really good every time you use them and don't let the paint dry out on them. You can clean the paint out once they dry, but you have to use a special soap and it doesn't ever come out perfect when you're all done. Okay, so when I squeeze out my paints, I like to keep the paints, usually if I'm working with colors, the warm colors to cool colors on one side, so they're somewhat organized, but I like to keep them on the outside edge so I can use the center area here to do all of my mixing. Okay, you'll also have, and you also need to have ready your palette knife. So here I have a metal palette knife, but they also make plastic ones which you can use. I don't think I have one here to show you right off the hand, but the plastic ones also work well. But you do have to be careful. You're pushing down hard with the plastic ones, they'll snap. The metal ones are quite a bit more durable than this. Okay, so when you paint, there's a couple things I want you to keep in mind. This is something I'm going to cover in class quite often and refer to quite often, and that is paint quality. Okay, so this first project, I want you to get used to your brushes a little bit, and we're going to kind of experience what it's like to spread and apply the paint onto a canvas. So there's something I want you to go for as you're doing this, is to have good paint quality, which means your paint coverage is smooth and even. You don't have any thin spots, any thick spots, and you can stay in the lines. Okay, so you have to have control of your brushes. This assignment is all about learning how to apply the paint and learning how to control the brushes. That's all we're going to do with this. And so I have these 5 different activities here, which are going to help you as you try to figure out how to use the brushes best. And each one is going to be for a specific area. So we'll kind of go through each one, okay? And I'll show you some examples as we go along of what good and bad paint quality looks like. So the first part here, I would work on this one here. So we're going to take a little scoop with our palette knife of some white, okay, and a little scoop of black. Okay, now you'll notice I took a big chunk of white compared to what I took of the black. So typically when you're mixing paint, you're going to want to start with your lighter color and add your darker colors to it, because you can always go darker as you go along, but it's hard to go back, and the darker colors usually are a lot stronger. So even just that tiny little bit of black is going to change this white quite a bit. See, just that tiny little bit made it go this dark. Okay, so to mix your paint, this is what I do. I squish it down and scrape it back up. Okay, I see a lot of students will try to mix the paint like this. Okay, that's going to take forever. Don't mix your paint like this. Okay, it takes 3 times as long. The easiest way to mix your paint is to scoop it up and squish it down. That does a lot of mixing really, really quick. Okay? So you also want to make sure you keep your paint contained. You don't want to get it spread out too much, because then you're going to lose all this area here. It's going to be contaminated with paint that you may not want. So this is why it's another reason why it's a good idea to mix your paint like this. Scoop it up, spread it down. Okay, once you mix a little bit of paint, you can take, I'm going to start off with my large round brush. And typically I like to add just a little bit of water to soften it up a little bit. Now as you paint, you've got to play around a little bit with the consistency. So I'll kind of do a right and wrong example here so you can see what I mean of good and bad thickness of paint. Now artists will paint, when you get a lot of practice and experience, you can paint however you want to, but for right now we're learning how to control it. So you've got to learn the rules before you can break those rules. You can't just start off by breaking all the rules. Okay, so learn what they are, and then you can go on and paint in your own unique style. Okay, because I like really thick paintings. I think that can be really fun, but first you got to learn how to control normal paint before you go with super thick paint. So I've got a little bit of water mixed in with this. If you've noticed what I've been doing, I've been putting just a little bit of water because I want it a little bit thinner than what it comes out of the tube. Okay, that'll help it to spread, because as you can see when you work on canvas, canvas has a texture to it. And that texture is referred to as the tooth of the paper of the canvas. That's why canvas is a really good surface to work on, because it has this texture that helps to catch and spread the paint. If you work on a very smooth paper, the paint doesn't stick and it'll smear, and it's harder to control. So when you put the paint down, you want to make sure that it has a good even coverage. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in here, bring my camera super close so you can see what I'm doing here. Okay, so here we are super close. So you can see as I put the paint down that it's covering the canvas completely. And if I go slowly on these edges here, and if I paint with just the tip of my brush, I can maneuver around these tight corners. Okay, so that's the trick. A lot of artists and beginning students will go so quick. This is not like painting your house. You got to go slow and slowly apply that paint. Okay, now this would be a bad example of that. So if I scoop up a big gob of paint on my brush and don't add any water to it, I can see that it's really, really thick, and it often doesn't cover well. You can see where it kind of breaks along the edges here. Okay, and it's harder to control, so you want to make sure that you don't have any big gobs of paint on there. Now if you go the other route, let me thin this out here, and I have too much water, to the point where I can see my canvas through it. The paint does not cover up my canvas completely, then that's too much water. It's too thin. Okay? You're also not going to have enough control of your paint. You can see how the canvas is showing through a little bit right there. So this is what we want it to look like. If you see this, you need to add less water. Okay? If you see this, where you see the gobs of paint, that's too thick, you need to add more water. So you want to kind of that nice in between. This is something that's easy to control. These two are harder to control. It's harder to blend. It's harder to fix any mistakes. So you want to start off with relatively on the thinner side, but not too thin. Okay, so this is what we're going for. So when this one is done, it should look kind of like this. Okay, nice and even, full coverage here. So it goes right up to the lines here. If you have a couple little spots going outside of the lines, it's not going to be a big deal. But if you're slopping the paint on where you're out of control, then you're going to be marked down for your paint quality. Okay, so we want it to look like this. This next spot right here, you're also going to use your round brush because you're going to learn how to control a little bit of the pressure of your paint. So let me back up here. So back it up. Okay, now on this one over here, the instructions say paint each area with 2 contrasting values. So one's going to be a light shade of gray, and the other one's going to be a dark shade of gray. Okay, so I'm going to take this paint here. This is kind of a lighter shade of gray. I'm going to use some of that, but I'm going to scoop up a little bit and put it to the side and add a little bit more black to it, so I get a dark gray. So now I have a light gray and a dark gray. also a test to see if you can mix the paint and get different shades. So you want to make sure one's light and one is dark. Okay, so now since I have the light brush or the light paint on my brush, I'm going to go ahead and use that one. But if I was going to use anything lighter than this or darker than this, I'd want to clean out my brush first. Okay, and I'll show you how to do that. But, so what we're going to do is we're now use the little brush here. We're just using just the tip of my brush and making sure I have added enough water so that it spreads but covers up the canvas completely. I'm going to paint one side in, and it doesn't matter which side you do. Paint one side in with this light gray and the other side in with the dark gray. So if I lift up on the pressure of my brush, I can get that nice sharp point. Okay? If you find this is really hard to do because your brush is too hard, then you can go ahead and use your little brush, especially to get around some of these, oops, this one right here, especially to get around some of these super tight corners in here. So if I want to use my little brush, I can do that to get in the corners. But you'll notice the little brush does not hold a lot of paint, so it's going to take you forever. So do not do this whole thing with your little brush. It will take you 10 times as long to complete it. Okay, so maybe just around some of the tighter corners here, but see if you can try to do it with this the round brush here. Okay, but the key is to go slow. Don't go too fast. Try to keep a steady hand. And I know that's hard for some students. Get a little shaky. Sometimes I can turn the paper a little bit, a different direction, so I can see and watch and follow the tip of my brush so I can guide it. So oftentimes that can be a helpful trick to do. Just around all these edges here. So anyway, when this is done, it's going to look, again, like this one. Okay, you can see one shade is light, one shade is dark, nice, clean, crisp edges all the way around. Okay, this is what you call a hard edge. Okay, and that we're going to contrast with the next one down, which is probably the trickiest one to do, and that's using your filbert brush and learning how to blend. Okay, so when you do this one, which is the little target bullseye one, you're going to use your filbert brush to do this. Okay, now it indicates here the outer ring is going to be black and the center dot is going to be black. This middle ring is going to be a pure white. Okay, so I'm going to start off with my white, and I recommend you start off with the white because it's much easier to clean white paint out of a brush than black paint, and you'll see that when you get to start painting. So add a little bit of water to soften it up a little bit. And this is a good one that will help you to know if your paint is thick enough or not too thick. So you want enough to spread without any chunks. And we're going to paint along the center line here just with the pure white. You know if you've got enough paint is if when you move your brush across these little arrow lines here that you can't see them anymore. If you can still see them, your paint is too thin. But again, no chunks of paint. Try to get it even and smooth all the way around. So you're all the way around the circle here. Okay, so before I clean off my brush, I want to make sure that I've got it even and covered all the way around. Okay, then I'm going to clean out my brush. To clean out my brush, I'm going to take and just kind of swirl it around, stir it in the cup, and I like to take my brush up against the side of the cup, and you can see the paint literally come out. But you have to be careful you don't push down into the cup and scrub with your brush. You always want to make sure you're really gentle with the hairs on your brush, because if you get them tangled up, then your brush will be ruined and you have to buy a new one. There's no way to fix that. Okay, so as long as I've got most of the paint out, you can kind of check to see there's still paint coming out. So I've got a little bit of white in there still. Just try to get that out. Okay, that's pretty good. And then dab it dry on my paper. Now I'm going to pick up some black, some pure black. And I'm going to paint the center dot with this pure black. And try not to overlap just yet this white paint. So this is, I'm going to show you how to make what's called a soft edge, which is a blurry or blended edge. Sometimes I'm going to turn the paper. That helps me to get a nice clean line there. I try to do this kind of quick so it doesn't take up all your time. You guys can get to paint because that's what you want to do. You want to see this, you want to do this for yourself, which I totally get. So put some in. You also want to make sure that you do this in one shot. If it's close to the end of class, don't do this one because you're going to run out of time. If the paint dries, if the paint dries before you finish, you're going to have to repaint it. Okay, you cannot blend anything together while the paint is still wet. So now I'm going to take this side right over here. I'm not going to do the whole thing, just the half here. There we go, paint this all in here. Okay, so I'm not going to go all the way around because you'll get the point when I'm done. So I'm going to clean out my brush all the way, swish it in there, make sure all the black is off, and I'm going to dry it off pretty good too on my paper towel. Okay, so now to create the soft edge, this is where this brush comes in handy. I'm going to zoom in really super close so you can see what it is that I'm trying to do here. Not that close, not that close. Whoa! Holy cow. This camera likes to take over. Okay, there we go, that's a little better. Okay, super close now, you can see. So I'm going to take my brush, and I'm going to hold it to the side a little bit. When you do this, it's best to hold it straight up. So I'm going to take my brush and set it down so that half of it covers the white and then half of it covers the black. And then I'm going to move my brush, and I have to rotate it in my hand so that that brush stays perpendicular to that line. And then I can switch back and go the other direction. You can see that as I drag my brush over across that edge, so that where it's half and half, then I can see that edge starts to blend a little bit together. You just work your brush. You have to go over it 2 or 3 times. And I'm spinning my brush in my hand while I do this so that it keeps perpendicular to that edge there. So the idea is that you are moving in 2 directions so that you're moving your brush to the side, but also kind of rotating it like this so that it stays perpendicular. And that's why I say this is kind of a tricky part, because you got to get that to blend all the way around and spin it. Okay, do the same thing over on this side with the outer ring. So I'm going to start, let's see, here you go. I'm going to start the half and half, just bring my brush across. Now, if you can see, this is not, if this does not blend very well, or those edges, it's probably because your paint is not thick enough. You need to go back and reapply some more paint. Okay, if it blends too quickly, if it blends like instantly, then you probably have too much paint on your canvas, and you need to go and scrape some of that off. Okay, so you can see I've blurred all those edges, I softened those edges, so when it's done, it's going to look like this one here. This is a student example here. You can see really, really nice blurry, soft edges there. Okay, so that is the bullseye. The next one I want you to work on is the big square, which is we're going to practice some more blending. Okay, so in the big square, you're going to want to use your big brush, and I would recommend you start off again with the white. If you have one of these, if you have a really large brush here, this comes in super handy. So I'm going to use this one here, but you can use any of the other brushes on this one. But to cover a big area, a big brush is super handy. So I'm going to add a little bit of water now again. Here we go. Some water. And take just some pure white paint and spread some white paint just across the top inch or so of this square right here. Need to get a little bit of water. You can see that I'm dragging the paint instead of spreading it, so I need to add a little bit more water. There we go, that's better. When I get close to the edge, I kind of lift up my brush a little bit so I can see where I stop. Turn it the other direction here, and then pull some paint down. Okay, so I got this top area just the pure white. Now I'm going to go have, on my palette here, I still have some of this light gray. So I'm going to pick up a little bit of light gray. I'm not even going to clean out my brush because I'm just going to use some of the white in there. And create another stroke that overlaps what I just did. So half of this is going to cover up some of the white and blend in with it like we did on the bullseye one. So I'm just going to have to go back and forth just a little bit and maybe overlap my stroke just a little bit too so it blends together, because I want you to try to get an even blend from white. And eventually, as we get down to the bottom, it's going to become black. Okay, so we've got a little bit of gray blended in there. Now I'm going to pick up some more of this gray and start to work my way further down. And each stroke is going to add a little bit more of the gray to it, but I don't want to see stripes. I want to see it. I want you to try to get it to blend. And the trick to getting it to blend right is to overlap your strokes. I can overlap this new one I put down with the one I previously put down. They're going to blend together. Now I'm going to start to pick up a little bit more of this darker gray that I used before. It's a little too dark, so I'm going to maybe over here, let me scoot back so you can see what I'm doing on my palette here. I'm going to kind of do a little bit of half and half here. There we go, that's better. Put this next color down. I can see that it's got kind of a stripe, so what I'm going to do, clean my brush out just a little bit and work on blending that in. So overlap the two strokes and work back and forth to soften that edge there so I get more of a gradual transition instead of a definite edge there. Pick up some more of this paint, come down a little bit further, and so on. I'm just going to keep doing this until I get to the bottom, until it's a pure black. So when it's done, this is an excellent example here of what I hope it looks like or what you want to shoot for, okay? Because we're all about learning how to control the paint, okay? This last one here will probably take you the shortest amount of time, but we're going to practice using our little brush, okay? Use your little brush to make some really super thin lines from top to bottom here. So I want you to paint the following area with 10 straight vertical lines. So to use your little brush, you'd have to add typically a little bit more water than you normally would on regular paint, because the little brush doesn't hold quite so much paint. So I'm going to make sure it's clean. I'll rinse it out because I still have a little bit of that light gray in it. And I'm going to pick up some black and add just a little extra water to it, so it's a little bit runnier. Okay, and I'll show you some good strokes and some bad strokes. So when you use your little brush, you want to make sure you maintain this super sharp point. Okay, if you don't have a fine point, you're not going to get any little bits of detail. So sometimes, before I pick up my brush, I'll kind of take my hands and spin it like this, so that it still has a point. If I just push down and then pick it up, you can see that I've got this flat edge. I want this nice sharp edge, so I kind of spin it a little bit as I pick it up, and I'll get a nice point to my brush. Okay, so then I'm going to start on one end here, just using just the very tip of my brush and just drag it all the way down. Okay, so I want to try to make a super thin line. Okay, sometimes you can see what I did with my pinky. I kind of rested my pinky over here to help balance my hand. So if you're kind of shaky, use your head here to help balance what you're doing. You can rest your hand against the canvas. So I'm just going to start and just pull down. Now, as you can see, as it gets close to the end here, the paint starts to get a little bit thin. This is about as long as you can go before you don't hold any more paint to your brush. So those are two good strokes there. Let me show you a couple bad strokes here. So what I don't want to see is your brush loaded with goopy paint that's too thick, and then as you push down, you're going to go too hard. Okay, obviously that is way too thick than what you can do. This is totally pushing down. You got to be really soft and gentle. Okay, so that's way too much paint, way too hard. Try to get it nice and even all the way from top to bottom. Okay, you can also do it too thin. The paint there is a little bit too thin to do that. It's kind of hard to see on the camera there, but adding too much water can